The wedding hall looked perfect from the outside. Soft lights glowed across white flowers. Music floated gently through the room. Guests smiled, laughed, and lifted their glasses as if nothing in the world could go wrong that day. For the mother, it should have been one of the happiest moments of her life. Her son stood at the center of it all, dressed neatly, standing tall, trying his best to look calm. She watched him with a quiet pride that only a parent could understand. She remembered holding his tiny hand years ago, teaching him how to walk. Now he was here, starting a new life. Yet something didn't feel right. She couldn't explain it at first. It wasn't anything obvious. No shouting, no drama, just small things. The bride's smile seemed practiced, like something she had rehearsed in front of a mirror. Her eyes were sharp, always watching, always calculating. When guests congratulated her, she thanked them politely, but the warmth never quite reached her eyes. The mother told herself she was imagining things. Weddings were stressful. Everyone acted a little strange on days like this. During the reception, the noise grew louder. Music filled the room. People moved from table to table. At one point, the mother stepped away from the crowd to catch her breath. She walked toward a quiet hallway near the restrooms, glad for a moment of silence. That was when she heard it. Two women stood just around the corner. One of them was her new daughter-in-law. The other sounded like a close friend or bridesmaid. They were speaking softly, not whispering exactly, but not loud enough for the room to hear. The mother didn't mean to listen. She was about to turn away when one sentence froze her in place. "He won't survive a year." The words were calm, not emotional, not joking, just flat and certain. The mother felt her stomach drop. For a moment, she wondered if she had misunderstood. Maybe it was about work, or stress, or something harmless taken out of context. But then she heard the quiet laugh that followed. Not a nervous laugh, a confident one. The mother stood there, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they could hear it. Her hands felt cold. Her mind raced through every possible meaning of those words, none of them good. She thought of her son standing back in the hall, smiling for photos, completely unaware. The conversation shifted to something else, something unimportant. The mother stepped away slowly, as if afraid that even the sound of her shoes might expose her. She returned to the reception with a forced smile, carrying a weight she had never expected to carry on this day. She watched the bride carefully now. Every gesture felt different. Every glance seemed sharper. When the bride placed her hand on her son's arm, it looked less like affection and more like possession. The mother wanted to confront her immediately, demand an explanation, ask what she meant. But the room was full of people, cameras, family. This was her son's wedding day. She didn't want to ruin it with questions she wasn't ready to answer herself. So she stayed quiet. Throughout the evening, she replayed the sentence in her mind again and again. He won't survive a year. Survive what? Marriage? Stress? Something planned? As the night went on, the bride laughed easily, danced, accepted congratulations. No one would have guessed anything was wrong. The mother began to feel isolated, like she was holding a secret no one else could see. When the couple finally left the hall together, hand in hand, the guests cheered. The mother clapped too, smiling through a strange ache in her chest. She hugged her son tightly before he left. "Be happy," she told him. "I am," he said, smiling. She hoped he was right. That night, alone in her quiet home, the mother sat awake for hours. She told herself not to jump to conclusions. People said strange things under stress. But deep down, she knew those words hadn't been spoken lightly. She made a decision then. She would not accuse. She would not interfere. She would simply watch. Listen. Remember. Because whatever those words meant, they weren't spoken by accident. And somehow, she felt that the real story had only just begun. Life slowly returned to normal after the wedding. The decorations came down. The guests went home. The photos were shared and framed. From the outside, everything looked exactly as it should. But for the mother, something had changed. She spoke to her son regularly, just as she always had. At first, their conversations sounded normal. He talked about work, small plans, everyday things. Yet there was a difference she couldn't ignore. His voice had lost some of its energy. He spoke more carefully, as if choosing his words mattered more than before. When she asked how married life felt, he smiled and said, "It's good." But the words sounded practiced, like the bride's smile at the wedding. The mother reminded herself not to overthink. Every new marriage came with adjustments. It was normal to feel tired, normal to sound distracted. Still, The sentence she had overheard at the wedding never left her mind. She began to notice patterns. Visits became shorter. Sometimes, plans were canceled at the last minute. When she asked if everything was okay, her son would say yes, but then quickly change the subject. He stopped talking about the future the way he used to. There were no excited plans, no long conversations about goals. The daughter-in-law, on the other hand, seemed confident. She spoke clearly, often answering questions meant for her husband. She made decisions quickly and expected agreement. When the mother suggested small things, family dinners, visits, simple traditions, the daughter-in-law always had a reason why it wasn't a good time. None of it was openly rude. That was the strange part. Everything was polite, controlled, perfect on the surface. The mother noticed how often money came up in conversation. Not directly, but indirectly. Comments about expenses, about responsibility, about how hard life was becoming. Her son nodded quietly during these moments, rarely adding much of his own. One evening, while clearing dishes after a short visit, the mother saw her son glance toward his wife before answering a simple question. It was quick, almost invisible, but it stayed with her. That night, she opened a notebook. She didn't know why she did it at first. She just felt the need to write things down. Dates, conversations, small details that might otherwise fade. She didn't label it or give it a purpose. She simply wrote. She wrote about the canceled visits, the short answers, the way her son avoided eye contact when certain topics came up. And always, at the top of the page, she wrote the same sentence. He won't survive a year. Friends told her she was worrying too much. One even laughed gently and said, "All mothers feel this way when their sons marry." She nodded and smiled, but inside, she felt alone with her thoughts. Weeks passed, then months. The marriage continued, but the distance grew. Her son lost weight. He looked tired more often. When she asked if he was resting enough, he brushed it off. "I'm fine," he said. "Just busy." The daughter-in-law, however, seemed unaffected. She talked about plans confidently, about changes that needed to be made, about what made sense for them. One afternoon, the mother invited them over for lunch. The daughter-in-law declined, saying they were too busy. The son hesitated, then agreed with her. After the call ended, the mother stared at her phone for a long time. That hesitation mattered. She went back to her notebook and wrote one more line. "This feels planned. Not cruel. Not emotional. Planned." She began to wonder if the sentence at the wedding hadn't been a prediction at all, but an expectation. Still, she did nothing. She didn't confront. She didn't warn. She didn't interfere. She knew that accusing without proof would only push her son further away. If something was wrong, she needed to understand it first. So she watched. She listened. She stayed patient. And deep down, she felt that the truth, whatever it was, had not yet shown its full shape. But it was coming. She could feel it. A few months later, the couple moved into a new house. It was beautiful. Bright rooms, clean lines, a quiet neighborhood where everything looked calm and safe. When the mother visited for the first time, she could tell the house was expensive. Not flashy, but carefully chosen, like something meant to impress without drawing attention. The daughter-in-law gave a short tour. She spoke with confidence, pointing out details, explaining why certain choices were made. She talked about the house as if it were an extension of herself. "This place just made sense," she said. The son followed quietly, nodding now and then. He smiled, but the smile looked thinner than before. During that visit, the daughter-in-law made several small comments that stayed with the mother. She mentioned how difficult it had been to manage everything, how much responsibility she carried, how lucky it was that they had a roof over their heads. The way she said it felt final, as if there was no room for discussion. At one point, she joked lightly, "It's not easy owning a place like this." The son laughed softly but didn't say anything. The mother felt something tighten in her chest. Over the next few weeks, the daughter-in-law repeated similar comments. Always casual, always framed as humor or stress. But each time, they carried the same message: control. The mother began to wonder how they had afforded the house so quickly. She knew her son's finances well enough to know it would have been difficult. Possible, maybe, but tight. One afternoon, while sitting at the kitchen table during a short visit, the daughter-in-law stepped away to take a call. The son stayed behind, staring into his cup. The mother asked gently, "You like the house?" He nodded. "Yeah, it's fine." There was a pause. "Is it shared?" she asked carefully. He looked up, surprised. Then he smiled. "Yeah, of course. The answer came too fast. That night, back home, the mother couldn't sleep. The feeling returned, the same one she'd had at the wedding, in that quiet hallway. She didn't want to assume anything, but she also couldn't ignore the doubts anymore. The next day, she did something she had never expected to do. She searched public property records. It wasn't difficult. The information was available to anyone who looked. She typed in the address. What she found made her sit back in her chair. The house was not listed under the daughter-in-law's name. It wasn't listed under her son's name either. Instead, it was owned by a trust. A simple name. One she recognized immediately. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the screen. The trust had been set up years before the wedding. Long before the engagement. Long before the daughter-in-law had entered their lives. The mother felt a strange mix of emotions, confusion, relief, and something close to awe. So this was the truth. The house wasn't a gift. It wasn't leverage. It wasn't control. It was protection. Suddenly, many things made sense. The son's silence. His calm. His refusal to argue. His careful distance from financial discussions. He had prepared. The daughter-in-law's confidence, on the other hand, now looked different. It wasn't power. It was assumption. The mother closed her laptop and sat quietly for a long time. She didn't feel proud. She didn't feel victorious. She felt thoughtful. The sentence from the wedding echoed again. He won't survive a year. Maybe it hadn't been cruelty. Maybe it had been certainty, built on incomplete information. The mother realized then that the story she thought she was watching was only half visible. The rest had been happening quietly, beneath the surface. And if that was true, then whatever came next would not be accidental. It would be revealed. Soon. After discovering the truth about the house, the mother changed nothing on the outside. She didn't confront her son. She didn't hint at what she knew. She didn't look at her daughter-in-law any differently. Instead, she became quieter, more observant than ever. Knowledge had given her clarity, not urgency. The marriage, however, began to shift. The daughter-in-law's tone changed first. It was subtle, easy to miss if someone wasn't paying attention. Her confidence turned sharper. Her patience grew thinner. She spoke more often about stress, about feeling overwhelmed, about how much responsibility she carried alone. The mother noticed that money came up more frequently now, not in numbers, but in blame. Complaints about bills, about effort not being matched, about things not going the way they should. The son listened. He rarely argued. When he did speak, his words were calm, measured. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend himself aggressively. That calm seemed to frustrate his wife even more. During one visit, the daughter-in-law spoke openly about restructuring their future. She talked about selling things, cutting people out, simplifying life. The mother noticed how her son's jaw tightened at certain words. "You don't need so many outside opinions," the daughter-in-law said casually, glancing toward the mother. "It just complicates things." The son said nothing. That silence spoke louder than any argument. Later, while the daughter-in-law was busy in another room, the mother and her son sat together for a moment. It wasn't a deep conversation, just small talk. But she noticed something new in him, resolve. He wasn't confused anymore. He was waiting. As weeks passed, the daughter-in-law began pushing harder. She suggested changes that didn't make sense. Risky ideas. Decisions that would have tied everything together tightly, too tightly. Each time, the son asked questions. Not emotional ones. Practical ones. That only seemed to anger her. "You don't trust me," she accused once. "I just want clarity," he replied. The mother remembered that line later. Clarity. The daughter-in-law's behavior grew less polished. Small cracks appeared. The controlled politeness faded during moments of frustration. The mother began to see flashes of impatience that had been hidden before. It was clear now. Something wasn't working the way the daughter-in-law had expected. The mother thought back to the wedding day. The confidence in that whispered sentence. The certainty. That certainty was slipping. One evening, the son visited his mother alone. It was unusual. He said he had needed a walk, a break. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. "I'm okay," he said. "I just need time." The mother nodded. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer advice. She understood that this was his path to walk. Before he left, he paused at the door. "Thank you," he said quietly. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't need to. Soon after that, the tension became impossible to hide. Arguments happened behind closed doors. Short messages replaced conversations. The warmth that once existed, even if it had been surface level, was gone. The daughter-in-law began making demands instead of suggestions. The son began saying no. That was when the balance shifted completely. The mother watched from a distance as everything moved toward a moment she knew was coming. She felt no satisfaction in being right, only sadness that things had reached this point. Still, she knew something important. The year the daughter-in-law had spoken about was not unfolding the way she had planned, and whatever truth was waiting at the end of it would soon step into the light. The confrontation did not happen in a loud argument or a public scene. It happened on an ordinary evening. The daughter-in-law had been restless all day. Her movements were sharp. Her words clipped. She paced the living room while the son sat calmly at the table, listening. "You're avoiding the conversation," she said finally. "We can't keep pretending everything is fine." "I'm not pretending," he replied. "I just want things to make sense." "That's the problem," she snapped. "You question everything." The air between them felt heavy. She began listing everything she felt was unfair. How much pressure she was under, how little support she received, how she had expected their life to look different by now. Her voice grew louder with each sentence. "I gave up a lot for this," she said, "and I won't be left with nothing." The son looked up then. Not angry, not defensive, just steady. "You won't be left with nothing," he said. "But you won't control everything either." That was when she demanded answers. She wanted access, clarity, proof. She spoke of rights and expectations. She spoke as if everything was already agreed upon. The son took a slow breath. "I think it's time you knew how things are actually set up," he said. Her expression changed. The confidence she had carried for so long flickered. He explained calmly. About the trust. About the house. About the decisions made long before the wedding. There was no accusation in his voice. No bitterness. Just facts. The room fell silent. "That's not possible," she said. "You never told me." "I didn't hide it," he replied. "You never asked." Her face tightened. Shock turned into anger, then disbelief, then something closer to panic. "This isn't fair," she said. "That's not how marriage works." "It's exactly how honesty works," he answered. The argument didn't last long after that. There was nothing left to argue about. The assumptions she had built her certainty on were gone. In the weeks that followed, the marriage unraveled quietly. There were tense conversations, legal discussions, long silences, no shouting matches, no dramatic exits. Just the slow understanding that what they wanted from each other was never the same. The mother learned about the separation later, through her son. He didn't speak badly of his wife. He didn't explain details. He simply said, "It's better this way." She believed him. When she saw the daughter-in-law one last time, the woman looked different. Not defeated, but exposed. The confidence was gone. What remained was uncertainty. The mother felt no anger toward her, only clarity. The whisper at the wedding finally made sense. It had never been about love. It had been about expectation. The daughter-in-law had believed the year would end differently. She had believed control would come easily. She had believed her plan would succeed. She had been wrong. The son did not survive the year the way she had imagined. He emerged from it stronger. The mother watched him slowly rebuild his sense of self. He spoke more freely again. He laughed without hesitation. The weight that had followed him for months began to lift. One evening, as they sat together, the mother closed the notebook she had kept all year. She no longer needed it. The truth had arrived on its own, and it had changed everything. The year ended without noise. No announcements. No explanations to distant relatives. No need to prove anything to anyone. Life simply moved forward, one ordinary day at a time. The son returned to routines he had once enjoyed. He focused on work again, not as an escape, but with renewed clarity. He slept better. He laughed more easily. The tension that had once lived in his shoulders slowly disappeared. From the outside, nothing dramatic had happened. But inside, everything had changed. The mother noticed it first in small moments. The way he spoke with confidence again. The way he made decisions without hesitation. The way he no longer apologized for having boundaries. One afternoon, they walked together through a quiet park. Leaves shifted under their feet as the seasons changed. The mother watched her son carefully, not with worry this time, but with understanding. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, I really am." She believed him. They didn't talk about the marriage much. There was no need. Some things didn't require discussion to be understood. What mattered was what had survived the year: self-respect, awareness, and strength. The mother reflected often on that moment at the wedding. The whispered sentence that had changed how she saw everything. At the time, it had felt like a threat. Later, like a puzzle. Now, it felt like a reminder. People often reveal more than they intend to. She realized something else too. Silence had been her strongest choice. By not confronting too soon, by not accusing without proof, she had allowed the truth to surface on its own. And when it did, it was undeniable. There was no bitterness in her heart, only relief. The daughter-in-law faded quietly from their lives. There were no harsh words exchanged afterward, no public blame, just distance, growing naturally, until there was nothing left to bridge. The mother wished her no harm. She understood now that not all damage comes from cruelty. Some comes from expectations built on assumptions. The year passed. On the anniversary of the wedding, the mother found the notebook she had kept hidden away. She flipped through the pages slowly. The dates, the observations, the questions. At the top of the first page, she saw the sentence she had written again and again. He won't survive a year. She closed the notebook and placed it back on the shelf. Her son had survived. Not by fighting, not by proving anything, but by being prepared. That was the truth that had shocked her the most. Strength didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waited quietly, doing its work in the background, unseen. As for the mother, she learned something about herself too. About trust, about patience, about knowing when to speak and when to wait. She had wanted to protect her son from pain. Instead, she had learned to respect his ability to handle it. And that, she realized, was its own kind of peace. Life continued. Not perfect, but honest. And that was enough.